Thank you, Landon. So we'll start with the path presentation. Who is it, Shannon or Glenn? Do we need to give you permission to share your screen? Shannon? All right.
Yeah, I have the PowerPoint.
All right, you should be able to share now.
Everyone see that?
Yes. Yeah, it's up.
Yes.
So here's our agenda. We'll go over inclement weather bed updates, outcome updates, meaning outreach in our housing outcomes, our new search policy, renovation update, and then we'll leave time for any questions. Our inclement weather updates. We've had 26 beds since 12/27. Prior to that, we had the 11 beds. So we officially opened for inclement weather beds on December 1st from, 1 second. I have to minimize this. I can see. Okay. From 1/29 to 3/22, winter shelter was open for 23 nights. The average number of residents was between 17 and 26. And we remained open 24 hours a day from 3:13 to 3:15 and from 3:19 to 3:24. The total number of unduplicated individuals served from 12/1/22, from 12/1 to March 22nd is 181 individuals. Do we have any questions on the winter shelter beds? No.
Yeah, sorry, Shannon.
Yeah, I have
the mute button.
I can't see anyone because I can't see. I can't.
Yeah.
So I have it minimized. So
it's okay, and the button for Zoom is different from Teams, so I'm always having to find where it is. Just curious if of the people that you got, and 181, that is an amazingly high number of unduplicated people in just 3 months. Have any of those resulted in engagements into taking shelter?
Into what?
Into like going into a full shelter?
Yeah, we have had some individuals that if we had like just our regular, unreserved in our housing beds, if we had an opening and they wanted to stay, they did transition. Unfortunately, I don't have that number available. But yeah, they have.
Just to corroborate that, I found that the inclement weather beds really did persuade a fair bit of individuals, at least on my caseload, who were recently apprehensive about re-entering into path for a long-term kind of stay after, being on the winter beds, seeing how there's easy access to food, warm shelter, a warm place to stay over the night, plus having, an access to showers. It just really, at least for, I would say, 5-6 of my clients that I've managed to get into in-room housing, that was at least in part a reason for them to go into long-term care.
Okay.
Thank you, Odin.
Is that it on the winter shelter? I can't see you guys, so.
Yeah, I think that's it right now.
All right, thanks. All right, Odin is up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Odin. I'm the outreach specialist for PATH Santa Barbara. For those who don't know me, I'm going to go and give you a little bit of outreach updates for the last month or last 2 months or so. Starting February 8th and all the way up to March 8th, PATH and CityNet worked diligently touching base with the Yanonali labor line at least twice a week to inform individuals of the imminent closure and just building rapport, speaking with individuals and primarily speaking with Spanish-speaking individuals who were either laborers or homeless or both, seeing if there's any way that we can get them into some kind of shelter, long-term care, or try to get their documents. And from that, we've managed to see, as per the rescue mission, we've seen an increase of Spanish-speaking individuals who have been utilizing the resources at the NNCs and asking for resources. Let's say the Good Samaritan Diversion Hotline, where they can get connected with getting their documents, or finding places that are, you know, more suitable for shelter rather than just staying out there and encamping. And we were seeing a little bit of success right before the labor line closed up, and it was all fenced off. And now looking back over that ways, although we do see a fair bit of still see some individuals out that ways, no longer there, you know, big encampments, or let alone, let's say, the 30, 40 individuals under one tarp that I've seen a few times before. I'm hoping that further in the future, we'll be able to see that place, you know, restored to its proper usage as a labor line. So outreach efforts currently right now, I have 25 individuals enrolled in my program, which is up 3 individuals since last time we spoke. All the time we're working to try and either increase their income, get them housing, get them into shelter, whatever their goals are based on what they've disclosed. And since we've last spoken, I've housed 2 individuals in permanent housing, one with a voucher and the other with PATH Permanent Supportive Housing Services, while also entering 4 individuals from the street onto shelter. And I wanted to share one of the stories of one of the people that I've housed. He was a laborer beforehand, and after coming in from abroad, he worked with his son in his care. But after a car crash caused him to become disabled and had to and resulting in him having severe memory loss, he was unable to work and care for his son, leading to his son being, unfortunately. Oh, what's that? Was there a question?
No, I think that was just background.
Okay. Unfortunately, leading to his son no longer being within his care. But after successfully, you know, getting in touch with disability advocacy, rehabilitation training, he was able to reintegrate into the workforce. And after CPS told him, hey, you need to get housing, you need to get income before we can give you your son back, he worked his butt off. He got not 1 but 2 jobs, and did everything that he could with his disability advocate. And after being able to reintegrate into the workforce, and they came up to me, said, hey, Odin, is there any way we can get this man housed? And working with AmeriCorps, we managed to successfully find an apartment that's rent reasonable, newly renovated, and now he's got source of income, support system that he can rely on, and, you know, a really, really good case for him to go back to CPS and say, hey, can I have my son back? Hey, let's bring everything back to normal. So I just wanted to share that. And one final update that I wanted to bring up is that because of increased calls in and around the area, we are just saying, hey, we do hear you, that there has been a fair bit of interaction in around Cacique Street, not only in just from the Eastside RAPs, but from the waterfront RAPs as well. We've noticed that there's a lot more calls for services, so we are playing around with the idea of having a dedicated Milpas and Cacique, Lower Milpas and Cacique outreach day, where Pat, Synod, and hopefully Good Samaritan can all join in one day to just, you know, connect with businesses, connect with the individuals out here, because we are saying that, hey, there's still, although we're doing whatever we can still do what we can do more out here to really focus on, you know, this place in particular. So with that, that's basically all the updates that I have for you all. If you have any questions.
I'm wondering if you could just update, since you were speaking about your efforts, on the top 5.
Oh, on the top 5.
Yeah, and not
Gladly,
obviously
yeah.
names or anything, but just kind of how we've identified folks and the progress that was made.
Of course. So a while ago, we identified 5 individuals who were mainstays of the area. 5 who we decided who were high priority individuals who were either in services but for some reason or another didn't want to engage in services again, or had previously burnt down bridges. And I'm happy to say that after weeks and weeks of working, 2 of the individuals so far have, I would say, done a complete 180. After building rapport, I would say we've connected one individual who was previously unenrolled with any of the service providers for years, to reconnected him with behavioral wellness. And right now he's going to be meeting a clinician soon, and rather he won't be meeting, but the clinician will meet him where he's at, making things much, much easier for him to reintegrate into a program. And in his words, he said, I mean, this is completely different from when I first met him. He said he would be interested in a program, which was miles and miles away from when he first told me, hey, Odin, I appreciate what you do, but that's not what I want right now. That's right. I just want to talk about da 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 da, or this other goal. Now he realizes, hey, there are people out here who want to support me. There's people out here who are actually looking for me. And last time me and Sidney were out here, he said, Odin, thank you for bringing me the support that I need. So we've got 2 individuals who've went from high priority into low priority, and now we've re-triaged, and now we're going to be meeting up again, or rather yesterday we met up again to move 2 more individuals who have had, multiple calls about up into the high priority status, and now we'll be diligently working again alongside, CityNet, Good Samaritan, to see what we can do about these individuals. Tino, you have a question?
Yes, Odin, thank you for that really comprehensive report. It's appreciated. I'm always interested in knowing what the outreach strategy is for continuing to get people into a program or offering them shelter on the Kasika and Milpa Street underpasses, as those businesses are heavily impacted on Kasika, especially in that little corner there. That, and what is your policy on outreach during rainy days?
Outreach during rainy days, honestly, on rainy days, we know for a fact that a lot of the individuals in and around the east side move towards the underpasses, whether it be Cayces, Chavez, Alisos, Milpas, all those places. And on rainy days, it's all hands on deck. And that's among all of the outreach service providers, not just PATH. We try to go there at least 3 times or so. I know I was out there in the morning, and then me and Cindy were out there in the afternoon on the most recent rainy day. And then a little bit later on at the nighttime, they touch base again to see if there's any other place if they want to move over into shelters. And although I can't provide too much transportation because, well, it's really, really close. PATH's warming shelter, really, really close by. CityNet can also provides transportation to individuals who, let's say, who don't want to have, don't want to interact with PATH warming shelter, or have had a negative experience before, or for some reason or other, a little bit apprehensive about that. They haven't been able to transport individuals to other warming shelters in the past. So when it's raining, we understand that the rain is I would say a deadly force. So we try to do is just touch base with these individuals as often as we can, and then if needed, transport.
And then Fernando, if you wanted to speak to the warming centers, you can go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, so just kind of piggybacking off of what Odin was saying, it is kind of all hands on deck. Typically when it's forecasted to rain, myself and Todd, we go out in the general areas, hand out flyers that are generated by the county or the warming center, just with the information and the addresses as to where to access the shelters. We have seen CityNet actually dropping people off and stuff, and it's really nice just to see that someone having like 6 luggage bags. It's pretty hard to get them somewhere, and to see that person being dropped off and just having a dry night and a meal, it's pretty good. It's very warming to see that, and just kind of, we've unfortunately seen sometimes when it is rainy, all the shelters downtown are at capacity, so they'll have to hike up at night, and we still let them in. If we're getting closer to the capacity, we just tell everyone to squeeze a little tighter. We try to serve everyone that we can.
Great, thanks for that update.
And thank you, Fernando, for the work that you do. Seriously.
Are there any more questions regarding outreach? No, I wanted to add to Odin's presentation. He left out that he's also currently working now with 2 individuals with emergency housing vouchers for housing. So these are our housing outcomes. This is information since December of 2022 among all programs, meaning rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, outreach, and our interim housing. We've since December 1st housed 32 individuals, which is a total of 24 households. Are there any questions?
Not specifically to the housing outcomes, but Natasha did put in the chat for Odin, just kind of if you could explain more about your program and what does that work look like?
Gladly. So Natasha, Path Outreach, what we try and do is just we meet people where they're at. We go out basically 3 to 5 times every single week, meeting with individuals and asking whether or not just building rapport, seeing what kind of programs that you're interested in. But what we try to do at Path is just go housing first. Let's see, address their goals to whatever barriers there are. And then if they say, hey, Odin, I think I'm interested in housing. Hey, Odin, I think I'm interested in either increasing my income, having going into shelter or going to housing, then I enroll them onto my program, and then I hold their hand for as long and all the way up until they do receive housing, or they say, hey, Odin, I don't think this is working out. I don't think this is a productive relationship or something like that. So what I do generally after meeting with the individual, we develop a plan to say, hey, what are our primary goals? I'll list off goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and see what we can do about addressing each of those goals one at a time. Sometimes there are different barriers to housing that need to be addressed first. We try to do whatever we can to make them housing presentable and get them document ready. So that means getting all of their important documentation there so that when we talk to the property management companies, when we talk to anybody who would be willing to house them, they are not only presentable, but also they have all the documentation needed. We also in the back end work with trying to find some kind of long-term subsidy or support, some kind of way to pay for these for their stay. If in the case, let's say they're living off a disability and cannot reintegrate into the workforce, we try to do what we can to find some kind of long-term subsidy, either with Path permanent supportive housing or with a voucher. That ways they can, get them housed, and then once they're housed, we do a warm handoff to their supportive case manager so that they can address any other goals that we did not address during our first plan. Let's say it was difficult for them to get off of illicit substances while they were on the streets. Once they're housed, we found it's much easier to reintegrate them into let's say a detox rehab program because they have that sense of stability. Or if they say, hey, Odin, I really appreciate you. I can't focus right now without the use of these illicit substances. Okay, then let's get you into detox first and then go to housing. Really, it's just being flexible with whatever the client needs, because we trust them to be experts about themselves. And we do whatever we can, to facilitate, to advocate, and to ultimately house.
And I think just to add to that, because it's not just Odin's program, this is consistent with all of the providers that participate in our coordinated entry system. Once they're enrolled, there is a process for which they are determined what housing opportunity they're eligible for, and then that starts the document ready process of obtaining those documents that they need to become eligible for that housing opportunity. And then comes in that general case management component of, do they need behavioral wellness? Do they need substance use support? Are they interested in income and working? And so that's kind of the beautiful thing about the coordinated entry system, is that it's no wrong door. So whether it's Odin or CityNet or Good Samaritan, or, you know, even at the rescue mission, the process generally is the same, regardless of what program they're entering into. Hopefully that answered your question, Natasha. Shannon, if you wanted to continue.
Okay. So the next section, I'll talk about some of our policy changes. This is something that has actually been in works, been in the works since last year. And we now have the policy in place, 2 policy changes. We're hoping to get it started in April. I'm going to be out of town until next Wednesday. So then we will start the process of informing our partners and then holding a town meeting for our residents to inform them of the changes. And once these 2 steps happen, then it will be fully in effect. And what the new policy changes are going to help, we hope, is safety within the shelter and safety within the community. And the first policy change is random searches. We will be conducting bag searches upon entry into the shelter for alcohol and illegal substances and weapons. If someone refuses to have their bag searched, they won't be allowed entry into the shelter. We will also be conducting random searches throughout the month as individuals stay here. And the other policy change is our policy change on substance use in the shelter. Previous to this policy change, individuals would be given several warnings about alcohol use or illegal substance use in the shelter, and then would eventually be exited. When the new policy goes into effect, they will be given 1 warning if caught using alcohol or illegal substances in the shelter. The next time will result in them being exited from PATH. Are there any questions on either one of those policies?
Shannon, just wanted to clarify. So the policy is if they're they have items, but if somebody comes in and they're intoxicated, what's the policy?
There's no policy change. We
So-
have no policy against individuals being under the influence of a substance. They just cannot use substances in the shelter. Are there any other questions?
Doesn't look like there are.
Okay. Oh, wait.
Sorry. What does it mean for someone to be exited from PATH?
It's not forever. They're exited based on different, people can be exited for substance use. They could be exited for violence. They could be exited for stealing. It's not forever. It's on a case-by-case basis. They can come back in the shelter in a future date. It would just take a meeting with management to talk about if anything's changed and steps towards improving whatever reason it was that they were exited from the shelter.
Shannon, what happens when somebody's exited? If they have a case manager, let's say it's a CityNet client, if they're exited, does CityNet get notified, and is there a process for easing up that transition?
There's certain reasons such as violence, it's an immediate exit. But let's say for like the, substance use, or if they have a weapon that they won't surrender, they would have to leave immediately. But we follow up with case managers, and we try to give notice for some transition of care to take place, but not with violence. We don't, it's an immediate exit.
This is also a little bit where I come in. So in order to continue that, continuum of care, depending on the circumstances which the client is exited, and let's say they still are on the east side, and they said, and I've noticed that, hey, they're at Path, they're no longer. I touch base with, I try to do what I can to touch base with them, touch base with their case manager, and see what the barriers were while they were at Path, and to see if there are any other ways to either get them reintegrated back in, or to go into some other shelter, or to go or try a different, try some kind of different approach. Because for some reason or another, they were exited from Bath. I just try to get to the reasons behind why, that sort of thing.
I have a concern, Shannon, about releasing somebody back into the community who has a deadly weapon. That doesn't seem, well, here's my question. Is that person listed? And is that person's name given to the police? Because if that person is angry, they could go right next door and really cause some damage. So what's the policy there?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a deadly weapon. If we did find a deadly weapon, we would report it to the police. I'm talking about things like pocket knives.
And that is a deadly weapon. If it's anything over 6 inches, it's a deadly
weapon. Yes, if it's something that's considered a deadly weapon, it would be reported to the police.
Good. All right. That was my question. Thank you.
Like, for example, we have people that use things as weapons, might not necessarily be a weapon, that they've surrendered until they leave. Like, the example I can give you is recently, it's a back roller. It's hard to explain what it looks like. But the individual was throwing it at people and swinging it at people. So something like this is not something that they're using as a weapon, but it's not considered a deadly weapon. Does that make sense?
I'm specifically speaking of guns, knives, bottles, brass knuckles kind of thing.
Yeah, I've never confiscated a gun here. So, but if it was something like that, yeah, we would report it to the police.
Great, thank you.
I'll just add, if I may, for those that don't know me, I'm Glenn Hilton, also with PATH. It's important, of course, to note that our staff are not law enforcement officers, so we don't have the authority to force people to surrender items. And that's why the options that we have are to deny access so that they don't harm the other residents in the building or our staff. And the other option, of course, as Shannon just said, is that we would notify law enforcement when that's appropriate.
Thanks, Glenn. As a neighborhood advisory council representative on the east side, that would be a concern for me. So thanks for clarifying that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think there's some really amazing work being done. And what continues to concern me is, though you are making some great progress with a number of your cases and getting people housed and having them transition into, let's say, healthier, better, more civil living. The thing that you guys keep, you're nudging so incrementally, frustratingly slowly into the things that are of concern to the neighborhood. And the things that are of concern to the neighborhood are the encampments around, the drunkenness. And I know we've, gone back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on this, that, you've said these are not our people, but there is a relationship between the residents at PATH, the people who are not residents, but are their friends, or they're, I don't know, drug dealers, or people that they exchange whatever with. And that is seen in a ripple effect from PATH emanating out up Milpas Street and around on the beach and so on and so forth. And yesterday I took a picture, I'll submit it. The bicycle camping collection that was on the sidewalk by Path, then moved across the street to the fence by the post office, moved down the street over to post office property by the fence, by the building of the post office, right? So it's not changing, it's moving. And what we as residents and businesses want to see, and I know you're working hard on it, and I know it's really difficult, we want to see a reduction in these behaviors of camping and drunkenness and antisocial behavior and all of that. So can you please tell us what you're doing on those fronts?
Well, Natasha, I know I have said this before. We don't have the authority to enforce laws on public streets. Our individuals do have a good neighbor policy that they're held to, and that's really all we can do is hold them to the good neighbor policy. There's nothing we can do on public streets for individuals that we don't serve. And if our individuals are committing crimes on public streets, again, we're not law enforcement officials. We can't enforce these laws. We can only report these laws to the police.
And I would also just piggyback on that. And I don't see anybody from PD here today, but as you know, this is a priority area for the city and for the police department, and they're out there and they have stepped up enforcement. The thing that our officers are always reminding other citizens is to keep reporting those things so we know how to divert the proper resources. And we have the challenges of also limitations to what we can do. But if we can't be out there 24/7, so notifying police, submitting those encampment reports, all that litter. Joao, his team works extensively in that area to just keep constantly on it, so that we don't ease up and let people, let it be known that this area is not a place where you can do those kind of things. So I encourage, as always, to keep using those resources, the PD, the encampment response cleanup. We are working with our outreach engagements. Thank you, Joao. He's posted the links. Working with our outreach workers to keep building the rapport, to get them to accept services. Those are all things that we need to keep doing and keep at it. But I understand your frustration. I completely understand it.
Okay, are there any other questions on our policy changes? Our renovations continue. Right now we are working on both downstairs bathrooms. The men's bathroom is slated to be completed on March 27th. We just started on the women's downstairs bathroom, so approximately 8 weeks construction on that. Do we have any questions on any of the areas?
Yeah, just quick question. I think going back to the good neighbor policy you referenced, what is policy on people that are staying at the shelter and they have friends, if they leave the premises and they have friends hanging out with them? What is that policy?
Well, our policies are regarding loitering and panhandling on the streets. We have a map. Sorry, I don't have it with me, where when they come in, they're given the good neighbor policy on the map area where they're expected to not panhandle and not loiter on the street. I don't have any control over their friends being outside, unfortunately. Unless they too are here and have signed the good neighbor policy.
How is that enforced?
The good neighbor policy, you know, now that we have outreach, Odin can tell us about it. Neighbors can tell us about it. The staff, the other staff do go outside 3 times a day, 7 days a week while they're picking up trash. But what they're also doing is taking note of who's on the sidewalk and what they're doing. And they do engage with them. So that's another part of the outdoor rounds that our shelter staff do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm just would like to highlight my point that we, until PATH took over, we made some incredible progress in our neighborhood and really saw some incredible shifts. And it was heading in the right direction. And we continue to see it backsliding worse than it was before we began pushing against the policies of the former Casa Esperanza. So I know that you're kind of throwing up your hands and going, hey, you know, we can't police this and we can't do that. We can't do the other thing. There are things you can do culturally within PATH to shape the behavior of your residents. And I'd like to hear more about what you're doing to do that rather than hearing you throw up your hands around it.
Well, I think I just touched on that on our policy changes concerning weapons and substance use in the shelter, but I would like to hear from you what you think we could do culturally to change.
Yeah, what you said,
yeah.
Shannon, was those were things that are related to what happens in PATH.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to impress upon you and a few other people is that there's a territorialness to this. There's a boundedness to it, meaning that what happens from the sidewalk towards PATH is your business. From the sidewalk that's public, not your business, right? And what is happening is when you have a population that is a troubled and dysfunctional population that is magnetizing others to that location where there are friends and relationships, then the impacts of what's happening at PATH ripple out to the neighborhood. So some of the things that you could do, and I'm just making this up on the fly, is that you can have your residents, once they are learning to behave more effectively, share those behaviors. If you're giving them a map and saying, you know, you can be good here on this side of the street, but you can be bad over there, that sends the wrong message. You can start encouraging them to change their behavior, change their mindset. You know, I know you're doing some of that, but that is, the focus is getting them, you know, into housing, right? I'm asking you to expand your focus so it's no longer just the housing, but behavior changes that impact their friends as well. So if somebody drops something on the street and their friends go, hey, you know, I'll throw my litter and cigarettes on the street, that is not a shift in behavior. But if your residents say to their friends, pick that up, we don't do that here, that's a behavior change. And that's a behavior change that's coming from inside PATH that's positive to the neighborhood. So as an example, you asked me to give you an example. That's a very simple example off the top of my head. But I want to see PATH taking responsibility for the neighborhood as well. I want you to stop saying, well, this is us and all the rest of that happens out there, not our business. I want you to take responsibility for what's happening in your premises that also emanates and radiates outside it.
Thank
And
you for that,
I think
Natasha.
Go ahead, Glenn.
No, I was just going to say, I think one thing that that Shannon did not speak to is that we do more than just housing, and we do more than just giving people a bed to sleep in. That we use motivational interviewing with our clients on a regular basis. It is part of a harm reduction strategy. It is part of a housing first approach. The first step is getting them someplace safe, and then the next step is to continue to work with them on all of their behavioral goals. And so we are addressing those on an individualized basis based on the priorities of those individuals. So for some individuals, maintaining their neighborhood is their priority. And for others, harm reduction and keeping them alive is their priority, helping them make decisions that isn't going to jeopardize their health and their future. So I do want to reinforce that we are in fact doing much more than just housing, that we are in fact working towards improvement of individuals' lives and stabilization wherever they end up and where they are in the meantime. So, but I appreciate your thoughts on that, and do want to emphasize that we are doing more than just seeking housing.
Yeah, and I like the idea, Natasha, of them speaking to their friends about behavior. I think it's a great idea. I don't know how, as PATH, we would enforce something like that. Being outside basically 24 hours a day, seeing how they're interacting with their friends on the street. I mean, I think it's a great idea for us to say, you know, maybe when you're out there, you could talk to your friends about, you know, not panhandling or not throwing trash on the street. I don't know how, as PATH, we would enforce something like that, but I think it's a great idea.
I also want to just add to that and just remind the group that there is a second shelter on the east side that is a couple of blocks away that sees similar behaviors or just of that flow out in the community in that region. You know, that's also why the labor line was fenced off, because of an uptick in activity in that area. So this isn't just specific to one shelter. This is something that we're seeing throughout Santa Barbara. So it's important that we also look at that as well.
I also, Shannon can probably confirm this, but it seems to make perfect sense to me that the opening of winter shelter is certainly a factor that is heavily involved. And one of the things we have been trying to do in recent times, particularly when it's raining, is to allow winter shelter individuals to stay in our shelter during the daytime while it's still raining for certain periods of time. And so, you know, but with winter shelter, it's much more harder to enforce with them, simply because, you know, they only have a guarantee of being there that night at that moment. And so the behaviors sometimes can be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, that's true. We have been open 24 hours a day for several periods of time during the many atmospheric rivers we've had. I've been here 4 years. This is the most rain I've seen in 4 years. And so, but yeah, that's true. We have, but you know, there are unsheltered people in the city of Santa Barbara. We don't have enough shelter space. So to assume that PATH, who has 97 shelter beds, is responsible for all the unhoused individuals on the streets of Santa Barbara or in this neighborhood, it's not possible for us to address or help all these individuals. We are open during the day too, which is already helping to keep people off the streets and out of the neighborhood, whereas other shelters are not.
And one thing I just wanted to jump in just for community's understanding, and one thing that Glenn pointed out on is the harm reduction, you know, and housing first model that PATH uses, being very familiar and collaborating with them strongly, and having now, I would say, I think it's 18 individuals that we've recently now have been able to shelter at PATH, which for the community overall and multiple individuals from the east side makes a huge difference. But we have to always understand when we're coming for solutions, we have to understand what we're working with. PATH is one of the lower barrier shelters from shelters that we have available. There's different levels of sheltering and what's going on. And I have to say, just based off what Shannon was talking about earlier on the rules and the things that they're able to enforce, they're able to be more, in control of, is a step towards helping what affects outside of PATH, and just to tag on with what Shannon's saying is that, like I said, there definitely can be in control of everything that's going on outside of there. And definitely I heard you, Natasha, as far as being able to have, try to set an example with their clients that will hopefully set another example for individuals that are not currently staying at PATH. That's an ideal situation, but that's definitely something that's completely out of just in general all of our control, whether it's outreach, whether it's PATH, but it's something that we want to, implement, enforce, and work on ourselves and be able to talk to them about. That's in our control. Those are the things that we can do. But just overall for outreach, and I know for PATH, collaborating with them, working under the harm reduction housing first model, I just want to make sure it's not forgotten about this because it changes. Because if not, it would be very difficult to be able to shelter the amount of people we recently have, specifically with PATH, which literally, like I said, is, I believe, 19 as of today, and this is just this year. So that's 19 individuals we've been able to get into a shelter because of the umbrella that they work under, so to speak. It's been able to get these individuals off the street. And of course, it's a work in progress in being able to, help that affect that. But I definitely hear Shannon that they're working internally. You have to be able to work internally to hopefully start affecting what's going on outside. And that's what's in control of them.
Thank you, Al.
We have a few more minutes left. If there's no more questions regarding the presentation that PATH had for us today, we'd like to give maybe a couple of our providers opportunity to share really quick about some of their outcomes.
Hi, John from CityNet. In the period from November through March, we were able to house 3 individuals from the Eastside region. 2 of those contacts were at NNC's, at the rescue mission, actually. The other, we were able to do a relocation to a safe haven to a friend's house back in New Jersey. We were able to get 4 people into shelters in the East Side. And then we got 1 into a detox. He was on an encampment on the Cacique Street, and we got him into a treatment facility. So that's what we've been doing with the population, and we will continue to work on these issues as to help our community, as well as to help the people that are out there unhoused.
Thank you, John. I don't know, Fernando, if you have any updates specific to the East Side that you can share with the group.
Yeah, so specific to the East Side, we've just we would consider working out of the navigation center there on the East Side as our meeting point for clients. We refer them back and just work out of there. This week, we actually connected with someone who we haven't had any consistent contact. So it's just little by little in this area, we feel, even when we do drive by or go through the area, it's not consistent. Down the East Side portion of Santa Barbara, in my opinion, is not consistent. There are some areas that are, but it's different every time we go out. And just the general consensus of the meeting and just different concerns there's been throughout this meeting. I know it's hard when we do open centers and different populations do attract, and types of deals. It's just part of the work we do and just trying to help those individuals that are going to us for the help. It's just hard. It's really hard. But that's all I got on behalf of Good Samaritan.
Thank you, Fernando. And then I will pass it over to Eric, who can speak a little bit more to the Neighborhood Navigation Center and some of the outcomes that we're seeing there on Wednesdays at the Rescue Mission from 8 to 10.
Yeah, thanks. So since December, we've averaged about 25 people at the navigation centers on those Wednesdays. But this last Wednesday, which was the first Wednesday since the labor line closed, we had about double that. We had about 50 people. So we are seeing an impact for sure as a result of the closing of the labor line. Overall, the navigation centers do continue to help exit people from the streets. In 2021 and 22, we had 202 street exits. Our goal was 100, and 13 of those exits came from the Eastside Navigation Center. That's all I got.
And just a reminder for the folks, the navigation centers are meant to be a one-stop shop with various providers, from outreach for case management to Doctors Without Walls for medical needs, behavioral health. We do also work with public health for substance use. The libraries that are helping with documentation and job efforts. So it's really just trying to reach the unsheltered population that aren't able to enter a shelter or aren't interested in entering a shelter, but are still working to improve their lives and receive services while still being on the streets. So those are some really great outcomes there. With just a couple of minutes left, does anyone have any other questions for the group or anything that they would just like to bring up?
I was just gonna jump in real quick and say, Odin and I were just talking offline about some of the stuff that was discussed in the earlier section of this meeting about engaging with people that are not necessarily clients of PATH or Rescue Mission, but have impacts on the neighborhood. So I think I'm gonna convene all the outreach providers and see if we can develop some strategies for addressing just, good neighbor policies, not just the PATH specific good neighbor policy, just being a good neighbor in general. So I'll be reaching out to not just Odin, but CityNet and Rescue Mission and Salvation Good Samaritan to have this this conversation.
Thank you, Liz. All right, with that, we will wrap up our meeting. Thank you all for being here. Happy Friday. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.